women are more exposed to these toxins. So it's estimated that if a woman uses about 12 personal care products in a day, she's exposed to 168 different chemicals just from those 12 products.
So you have more power over your health than what you've been told. This is the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast, and I'm your host, Maya Acosta. I'm passionate about finding healthy lifestyle solutions to support optimal human health. If you're willing to go with me, together we can discover how simple lifestyle choices can help improve our quality of life and increase longevity in a big way. Let's get started. What we eat certainly affects our health, but what we put on our skin and around in our environment can also affect us. Registered dietitian Kayli Anderson joins us to talk about environmental toxins and the role that they play as endocrine disruptors. Ladies, this is such an important episode, very informative. I hope you grab pencil and paper. As always, the full bio and links for all of our guests are found on our website, healthylifestylesolutions.org. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Maya.
So you contributed to the Lifestyle Medicine Handbook. This is one of them. And I believe that anyone can purchase this book on Amazon. Am I correct?
Yep, that's right. Anyone can get that one.
Okay. And then this one is designed more for healthcare providers who work with women. So improving women's health across the lifespan.
Yep. And you can also get that one on Amazon. I know it's a little dense for those who aren't into the science, but I know lots of people who have purchased it who aren't healthcare providers.
Okay. That's great to hear because I want to encourage the ladies to go out there and buy this book for themselves. And Kayli, I have been going through the various chapters because I've been hosting some of the contributors on my podcast. So we've spoken about menopause. We're going to be speaking more on fertility as well and other topics, even community. And so I've been going through it. And yes, there is a lot of science, but for the most part, the actual content that is important to us is fairly easy to understand and to read, and it's great content. I'm glad that all the references are there for people that want to follow up if you're not a healthcare provider, like you said. And then finally, the Plantation Project's Plant-Based Nutrition Quick Start Guide. This is the one that I've said to you, Kayli, that it's the one that I picked up in 2018. And this is when I learned, oh, wow, I'm not really eating very clean as a vegan. And so I thank you so much for that quick start. Can we start off by talking about how people can obtain this copy?
Yeah, so that is published by the Plantation Project. So you can go to plantationproject.org and you can, submit your email address and you'll get a digital copy of it. And then if you want to share it with other people, if you're a healthcare provider, you want to give it to patients, or maybe you just like to spread this information to your friends and family, then you can actually order hard copies like the one that you just held up.
Yes, absolutely. And I like what you just said about whether it's for yourself or someone that you love. I went through it and it answers a lot of the questions that we'll actually be answering today. So concerns about calcium, concerns about protein. It explains what the standard American diet is. For people that are new to this lifestyle, sometimes I think maybe that needs to be clarified a little bit. What do we mean by the standard American diet? And then there's some recipes in here. It even tells you how to get started in terms of what to have in the kitchen, in the pantry, in your refrigerator, how to do groceries. Oh my goodness, you need to get this. So now let's start from the beginning, Kayli. How in the world did you become involved with the Plantation Project, with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and all the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, so I certainly didn't grow up on a plant-based diet. I grew up on kind of typical Midwestern fare, lots of restaurant food and meat and potatoes and canned vegetables, that sort of thing. But I was always really curious about food and started cooking and kind of exploring food and health when I was in high school. And then when I went on to study nutrition, I experimented with lots of different things. I would buy raw food cookbooks and just lots of different types and styles of eating just to kind of see what they were about. But I had a professor in graduate school who shared the research with me. So a lot of the cornerstone studies that we cite in plant-based nutrition, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Barnard studies. So that professor shared those studies with me, and that really changed everything. To see the true power of food really shifted my perspective and kind of sent me on that journey. And then, the way that I got involved in the Plantation project out of grad school, I knew I didn't want to go into a conventional setting after learning all of that information. So I actually started my own personal chef company, and I would go into people's homes, I would cook for them, teach them about nutrition, and then teach them how to cook and kind of slowly wean them off of my cooking. And, when I was doing that, I was lucky enough to cross paths with Susan Benegas, who is one of the co-founders of the Plantation Project. And she was getting ready to put together the Quick Start Guide and asked me if I wanted to help with that. So kind of the rest is history after that.
What a blessing for you to come upon her, to meet her, and get involved so quickly early in your career, also so quickly in this way of living and being a great contributor. And I did say that I feel like there are not enough registered dietitians out there. So we're very blessed to have you speaking with us today. Now, so you've done all those contributions, and I mentioned in the intro that you're very involved in other interest groups for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. One of the things that you've created is the Plant-Based Mavens. Can you tell us about that, and why did you create it?
Yeah, sure. So that is something that I very recently launched. So it's new, but it's been kind of percolating for a while now. And, there's a lot of male energy in the plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine space and in medicine in general. And that's no disrespect to those men who have really, paved the way and done a lot of, wonderful things for the field of plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. But I always felt like there was, the women's voices were lacking a little bit. And there are certain, things about women's health, about the experience of being a woman, how that affects our health and how we receive healthcare, that only women can understand. And so I really just wanted to create a safe space that was women-centered, where women could go get information about plant-based nutrition, about lifestyle medicine, that really speaks to them, that really looks through the lens of the different concerns and, phases and things that you go through as a woman.
This is wonderful. Now, can anybody join? And is it a website and a Facebook group?
Yes. So anyone can, come be part of it. It's, written for kind of the average woman. So it's not lingo that will be over anyone's head. And it's a website. So plantbasedmavens.com. There's recipes, there's articles, and I will continue to add to that. And then I do plan to start a Facebook group as well, so we can start some conversations and people can ask questions, and we can kind of build community that way.
I agree that I feel like when I'm speaking to my listeners, the majority of my listeners are women. And I feel that when people like yourself come on the show, I feel like I'm adding a little extra for them, because we're specifically having this conversation for you, the woman who wants to improve your health. And so I thank you for that. Moving along, speaking about how nutrition impacts women, what are some of the unique benefits for women who eat plant-based diet?
Yeah, so there are very many, and that's another reason why I wanted to create Plant-Based Mavens, is to help women adopt, a plant-based style of eating in a way that keeps them healthy, that meets their needs, as all the different changes and phases that we go through from pregnancy to menopause, and to provide that information, because there are a lot of wonderful benefits. And sometimes we see women embark on a plant-based diet and then they run into pitfalls because they're not meeting their nutrient needs. So I don't want that to happen, because it can certainly be a really healthy way for women to eat. It can, help with healthy microbiome, support the immune system, lower risk of a lot of chronic diseases, of course. And women are actually slightly more likely than men to have more than one chronic disease. So that's really important for women. And it also helps lower the risk of a lot of reproductive health conditions. So things like endometriosis and PCOS. It can also enhance fertility. And, plant-based foods contain a lot of the nutrients that are really important for women's health, which we can get into a little bit in a little bit more detail. So those foods, really provide, the nutrition that women need.
Great. As you're speaking about all the ways that nutrition can improve our health, I'm thinking of young women. You've talked about PCOS as well. And I've known several people in my life who suffer from PCOS, and this is preventable. Women do not have to have PCOS.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that kind of gets at the marginalization that happens in healthcare with women, where a lot of our symptoms are dismissed, or things like cramps and, PMS are, said to be just normal. But really, women go through a lot of pain and a lot of suffering when they experiencing those things, and to have that as a society just be seen as normal, and we shouldn't talk about it or complain about it, and even dismissed in healthcare if you try to go and get some answers. Like you said, plant-based foods can actually help early on to ameliorate a lot of those symptoms and prevent a lot of those symptoms.
Okay, so are there any specific things that plant-based women should keep in mind? For example, any nutrients that they should pay special attention to?
Let's dig into that a little bit more. So, for fruits and vegetables, of course, emphasizing those, that's usually my first step with women, because they're so antioxidant rich, and a lot of conditions and symptoms that women experience are related to inflammation or an inflammatory state in the body. So those fruits and vegetables can be really helpful. And I specifically recommend that women emphasize leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, which are things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbages, citrus, and also berries. And that's because those groups of produce are rich in vitamin A, in folate, in vitamin C, and calcium, which are all really important nutrients for women to consider. Also fiber, that's kind of step 2 when I'm working with women, is to start kind of thinking about fiber, and that can help with the microbiome and immune system, and also reducing that inflammation and oxidative stress. And then one that, maybe sounds a little controversial is just making sure that women get enough fats. So there is a lot of emphasis on very low fat diets and decreasing fats in plant-based nutrition. But for women, and particularly premenopausal women, it's important that they are getting enough fat. So it is possible to overly restrict that nutrient. So we're talking about healthy fats here. So monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat sources, avocado, nuts, seeds, things like that. And diets below 15% fat are actually associated with menstrual cycle disruption in female athletes. So it's really an important one that we, want to pay attention to, because once you start really decreasing fat, it's difficult for premenopausal women to get all the nutrients they need, to get the essential fatty acids they need, to get the fat soluble vitamins that they need.
We will at some point speak about disordered eating and how we as women sometimes tend to restrict. And that's part of what kind of contributes to all the other health problems that we have, is that we're not taking in enough nutrients and enough fats that we need for our body to be optimized. Before we get there, can we talk about some of the common questions that come up around the plant-based nutrition?
Sure. Yeah. So one that we often think of related to women's health is bone health, because that is a concern for a lot of women, because as we age, as our estrogen production decreases, we do lose some of our bone mineral density. So protecting that is important. And what do people think of when they think of bone health? They think of calcium, and then they think of dairy, right? But dairy actually isn't necessarily the best way for us to get our calcium, and it isn't as connected to bone health as we've been led to believe by marketing. And there are a lot of plant-based foods that are really rich in calcium, and I'm sure that you and your listeners have heard this before. But just thinking about how does that cow get its calcium. It, eats grass and eats plants, which is rich in calcium. And then that calcium is in the milk. So we can just go straight to the plant-based sources. So with women, I want them to focus on calcium-rich foods. And I usually recommend like 6 mini servings of calcium-rich foods a day. Kind of spread throughout the day. And that might sound a little bit daunting, but it's really, foods that we're probably already eating if we're eating a plant-based diet, things like leafy greens, maybe a fortified plant-based milk, beans, nuts, dried fruit, nut and seed butters. All of those things are rich in calcium. And when I say a mini serving, we're talking about a half a cup of leafy greens or a half a cup of beans or 2 tablespoons of tahini, for example.
Yes. Now, when I think of calcium, I think of greens. I mean, other foods, just like you listed, but I always think of the greens. Is it true that consuming milk can actually cause our system, our body to leach the calcium from our bones?
Yeah, that is, kind of a theory that calcium or that milk, like the protein in milk, can actually cause an acidic environment and leach the calcium from our bones. So that is possible if you're consuming a lot of dairy. I think the key is that fracture risk in dairy is not as connected as we have been led to believe. So it isn't as aligned with bone health as as we might think.
Okay, the other topic that I think is very important when speaking about spinach and some of the foods that have oxalates is that that's a great concern. I know an individual who suffered with stones, kidney stones, and had a lot of health issues before going plant-based, then went plant-based and started overdoing it with the smoothies and continued to have a lot of problems. So he decided that it was best to move away from the plant-based lifestyle because of the oxalates. And I just, no matter how much I try to explain it, it just broke my heart because I thought there's so much misinformation. And I can't imagine how many people are having this idea that, green leafy vegetables are bad for us. So can you explain what are oxalates and how do they impact our body? And should we even be concerned?
Sure. Yes. It breaks my heart when I hear stories like that too, because I think we often micro focus on these little pitfalls or things to know about in a plant-based diet when, there are lots of those within the standard American diet. Or even a healthier, version of the standard American diet. So oxalates are a compound in some plant-based foods that can inhibit calcium absorption or decrease your body's ability to absorb the calcium. And you mentioned leafy greens. So the big 3 that we think of with oxalates are beet greens, spinach, and Swiss chard. And so it's not that we shouldn't eat those foods. It's certainly okay to include those foods in your diet. You just shouldn't rely on them as a calcium source. So they shouldn't count as one of your 6 mini servings. And, it's okay to eat a spinach salad or, to cook with Swiss chard, but, making sure that you're not eating that at every single meal because that could interfere with calcium absorption. But there's actually research that shows that the calcium in kale, which is lower in oxalates, is better absorbed by our body than the calcium in milk. So it's not that, all plant-based foods have an issue with calcium.
That's good to know. So question about vitamin D, where can we find vitamin D? Also, do we have side effects when we run low? And recently I was doing a little bit of research into mushrooms and read that you can obtain vitamin D from mushrooms. Is that true?
Yeah, so vitamin D is a tricky one because it is, classified as a vitamin, but it acts almost like a hormone in our body. And we're still really discovering all of the different roles and contributions that it has. Our main way of getting vitamin D is from the sun. It's very low in most foods, plant-based and animal foods. So the sun exposure is really the best way to get it. A dermatologist might debate that, and I know that that's a concern for a lot of people. But most of us don't get regular sun exposure because we're talking like 20 to 30 minutes on our limbs, on major parts of our body with no sunscreen, no No long sleeve shirt on at the height of the day. So a lot of people aren't getting that. Most people aren't getting that. So I recommend that everyone get their vitamin D levels checked because it's really common to be low in vitamin D. And then you can supplement with D3, which is the best form to supplement with. And, one note about D3 is that there is an animal derived type of D3, which comes from sheep's wool. And then there is a vegan type of D3, which is from lichen or a bacteria. So if that's a concern for you, then you'll want to look for the lichen source of vitamin D3. And then you mentioned mushrooms. So yes, it is possible to get vitamin D from mushrooms, but I don't really consider that to be a reliable source. So this has to be mushrooms that were grown in the sun. So you have to verify that because not all mushrooms are, they're farmed or grown in an industrialized way. Some say that you can take the mushrooms out of your fridge and set them in the sun, and then they'll absorb vitamin D. But all in all, vitamin D is so important, and most people are deficient in it that I don't see that as the best way to go about it because you could, get in trouble and not get what you need from that route.
It does make sense that a lot of people grow and have like these small grow houses. I don't know what they're called, but they're usually indoors in a very cool space, or probably, I don't even know if they require humidity because I've never grown mushrooms, but I've gotten really interested. And that's part of the benefits of being plant-based is that you start to discover all these foods that you weren't eating before. And so for me, it's become mushrooms. And by the way, can you throw in there why do we want to eat mushrooms? Because I know it's part of Dr. Greger's daily dozen as well.
Yeah, well, there are lots of reasons. I mean, if you think about it, the fungi kingdom is an entirely separate kingdom from the plant kingdom. So, it's kind of a separate food group that we, don't often include in the American culture, at least. But also it has umami, which is the fifth flavor. So we think of sweet, salty, bitter, and sour. And then umami is like a savory flavor. Mushrooms are great sources of that savory umami flavor. So cooking with them can kind of give you that, we associate umami with meat and animal-based foods, that savory flavor. So mushrooms are a really good replacement for that.
Absolutely. I love them. Okay. Going back to some of the other concerns that people have, what else is on your list?
Yeah. So, protein is one, of course, that comes up quite a bit. And, although our culture has led us to believe that, we all have a protein deficiency, that's usually not the case. However, it is really important for women, especially during pregnancy, when protein needs go up, and postmenopause, when we want to, preserve lean muscle mass. So getting those protein-rich plant foods is really important. So things like tempeh, tofu, beans, legumes, lentils, nuts, and seeds, those are all really great sources. And even whole grains, have protein in them. And then along those lines is soy that often comes up with women's health and, whether or not it's safe. So, the concern there is that soy contains isoflavones, which is, a plant estrogen or phytoestrogen. And the concern is that, do isoflavones act the same in the body as estrogen does? And, could that be dangerous? And it turns out that they don't act the same. So they bind differently to the receptors in our body. And so they're not interchangeable. And in fact, soy has a lot of protective qualities for things like breast cancer. In menopause, it actually can help dramatically reduce hot flashes, which, I know a lot of women have found benefit in that. So, that always comes up.
So is it also helpful at a younger age? So if women start at a young age as teenagers consuming soy, could that help prevent some of the hormonal problems that they could possibly develop throughout life?
Yes, some of the effects of soy have, in other cultures where it is common to eat soy, at a very young age. We don't often think of that in the American diet, but in other cultures that have been studied, it does actually have protective effects later in life for things like bone health and hormones.
Oh, right. Thank you. You
Mhm.
mentioned protein, and we are actually going to talk about how you like helping women heal from diet culture. As you mentioned protein, I was reminded of a guest who came on who battled for many, many years with disordered eating, and she would, alternate between one or the other, binging or anorexia. And when she finally got help and had her labs drawn, she was actually protein deficient. And we know, Kayli, at least we hear this a lot from physicians in the plant-based world, that protein deficiency is rare. However, when we're speaking about being heavily underweight or malnutrition, that could be a different case. So you like working with women, again, healing from the diet culture and taking a non-diet approach to plant-based nutrition. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because a lot of those things that we hear in plant-based nutrition, about protein or about fats, it's not that those things aren't true, but looking at it through the lens of women's health and a lot of the issues that women, can suffer from or come up against, it's really important to not, de-emphasize protein too much or de-emphasize fat too much. So that's a lot of what the non-diet approach is about. So for those people who aren't familiar with that phrase, diet culture, it's any messaging that values thinness, appearance, and the shape of our body above health and well-being. So health and well-being aren't at the center. It's kind of more the vanity metrics that are at the center. And so examples are, heavily focusing on weight loss, which we know that there are many ways that you can lose weight that are not, supporting your health and well-being. Using words like slim or skinny in marketing, we see like skinny popcorn and slimming of different things. And I also consider binary or black and white thinking to be part of this. So really extreme do's and don'ts lists or extreme restriction can be part of this. And, this diet culture is mostly targeted at women and it impacts women pretty heavily and it contributes to eating disorders, as you mentioned. And, anyone can suffer from an eating disorder, but they're actually 4.5 times higher in women than in men. And they're the second deadliest mental illness, which a lot of people don't know. So it's really important that we're aware of that. We're aware of the language that we're using and the approach that we're taking when we're helping someone change the way that they eat. And so I really like to work with women to kind of shift their perspective so that they're coming at plant-based nutrition from a place of self-care where their health and well-being is at the center. That's the goal versus these other, diet culture metrics.
You just answered the other question that I had here, which was how to approach plant-based nutrition without turning it into a diet. It's a difficult topic.
Weight in general is not always the most reliable metric of our health. And so I always encourage the women that I work with to, it's okay if that's one of their goals, but to ask them to kind of put that aside and pick some other meaningful ways to measure their health. So their stress levels or how their energy levels, how they're feeling in their body versus just, what the scale says.
Absolutely. So you are board certified in lifestyle medicine and you're passionate about other areas of lifestyle medicine in addition to nutrition. Is there another lifestyle pillar that you think is really important for women to focus on?
Yeah, so I think they're all, of course, very important, but there's one that's not technically defined as a pillar, but I think it's really important for women to know about, and that's environmental toxin exposure. And it's a little difficult to not come off as alarmist when I talk about this because it's often, a stone that a lot of people haven't turned over yet. And when you do, it's kind of like maybe a lot of people's initial introduction into plant-based eating. It's you didn't know what you didn't know, and you discover all sorts of information. So environmental toxins is very similar. And, when I say that, I'm talking about things in, plastics, cleaning products, body care products, pesticides, herbicides, and it's impossible to completely avoid environmental toxins. If you live in a city, you're exposed to pollution in the air, all the building materials and furniture and, textiles that we are around have these environmental toxins in them. But the point is to lower your body burden or decrease your exposure as much as possible. And this is particularly important for women because, number one, women are more exposed to these toxins. So it's estimated that if a woman uses about 12 personal care products in a day, she's exposed to 168 different chemicals just from those 12 products. So if you start adding up, your shampoo, your conditioner, your lotion, cosmetics that you use, it's really easy to get to 12 products. And then secondly, these toxins have, a unique detrimental effect on women's health. So they're connected to reproductive issues, virological issues, menstrual cycle disruption, premature puberty, premature menopause, which is actually correlated with cardiovascular disease risk. So that's, an important marker, endometriosis, infertility, PCOS. So, we want to lower our exposure to these as much as possible.
Are you also saying in terms of cleaning products, not just touching the product, but inhaling the product can actually affect us as well?
Yeah. So fragrances are an endocrine disruptor, which is a category of environmental toxins that act as hormones in our body. So the Environmental Working Group actually has a list of the dirty dozen endocrine disruptors to avoid. So you might be familiar with their dirty dozen, clean 15 for produce. They also have that list for environmental toxins. So anything that you're inhaling, like fragrances, perfumes, those are all potentially toxic.
I mentioned in the past that years ago, I stopped using a lot of these products. Not that I'm that informed, but I became highly sensitive to many things. So I can no longer wear perfume, fragrances. I can't light a candle typically because I'm highly sensitive. I get headaches. Definitely cannot have a lot of cleaning products in my house either. So when I am out and about in grocery stores, especially the ones that sell more natural products, I do tend to gravitate towards those aisles that have products for women, for people in general. But I'm always browsing to see what they have because I am aware of some of these things. And the reason that I bring that up is I was wondering how women can reduce their exposure. Should we try alternative products or just kind of refrain from using things like I've kind of stopped using hair products a long time ago, and I stopped using the regular deodorant many years ago. So the same thing with no fragrances, but in makeup as well, I think, right? Does makeup also affect us?
Yes, absolutely. If we think of our skin as our, largest organ and it is absorbent, anything that we're putting on our skin is making its way inside of our body as well. So it's really about, maybe eliminating some products. Maybe there are some things that you're using, like a perfume, for example, that you decide you don't need anymore. It's not worth the risk. And then just making swaps. And I know this can be overwhelming when you start to open, your medicine cabinet or the, cabinet under the sink with the cleaning supplies in it. But just making simple swaps can be, over time can be really effective because you can actually reduce the toxins in your blood really quickly from making those changes. And with cleaning products, it doesn't have to be expensive. That's another thing that, similar to switching to plant-based eating, a lot of people have a perception that it's expensive. This is another area. It can be expensive, but it can also be really economical. So for example, I clean my house with vinegar, baking soda, and lemon juice. And, you'd be amazed what you can do with those ingredients.
Right. I was going to say, I've heard you can make your own detergent and all sorts of things. And I started using Dr. Bronner's soap many, many years
Mhm.
ago, but Dr. Bronner's soap can actually be used to clean and to wash. You can brush your teeth with it. You can wash your hair. You can do your laundry by hand if you wanted to with Dr. Bronner's. I'm not promoting it, but, and I've also noticed like at Trader Joe's, they have sort of a line of products as well. They have a basic shampoo and conditioner that is paraben free. So that's the main thing that we're looking at when it comes to the shampoo and conditioner is are the parabens, right? And how they can affect us.
Yeah, parabens are one of them, and then there, are several other categories that you want to look for. And a good resource is the Environmental Working Group's Skin Deep cosmetic database. So you can go on and type in any product, brand name, and the specific product, and it will actually give you a rating for that product because a lot of these chemicals are not regulated. They haven't been tested for human health. And so you want to kind of do your own research.
Okay. I like this. And Kayli, you said it's not really one of the pillars of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, but maybe it needs to be. But I'm so glad that you're the one that is addressing this because if we're really wanting to look at our lifestyle and we want to see like how can we make changes to enhance our health, and we do it, through nutrition and exercise and stress management and all that good stuff, then yeah, we should consider also the products that we put on our skin and that surround us every day. This is a great topic. And I'm wondering, even in your plant-based mavens group, if this is something that women can have more of a conversation about and share products or share more information on how they're making that transition to healthier products.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great idea. And I do have a free guide that people can download on Plant-Based Mavens about low toxin living and kind of goes through the 4 steps that I recommend people take, which I'm happy to share here as well. But then also some products and brand recommendations to get people started.
Awesome. This is great. Okay, so now going back to food, because this is one reason that we had you on here. You're an expert registered dietitian who contributes to so much literature that's very beneficial to us. So, what are some practical steps that women can take to start transitioning so that they can eat more plant-based foods?
Yeah. So the first step, which is maybe a less practical and kind of an ongoing thing, is to really connect to kind of your vision for your life, your deeper why for doing this, and also start to cultivate that self-care mindset that we talked about. Because, as we mentioned, you can approach plant-based eating as a diet, like any other diet, and go on and off of it like a diet and let it kind of toss you around. Or you can approach it from a place of self care where it's really truly a lifestyle change. It's truly about your health and well being. So, shifting that mindset and doing that work is really important. And then, from there, you can start to get more tangible. So, one of the roadmaps that I really love that's in that plant based nutrition quick start guide from the Plantation Project is enjoy, adapt, explore. And so the first step is enjoy, and that represents identifying plant based meals that you already enjoy. So, what are some meals that are plant based that you already eat that you already like? Whether it's bean burritos or a bean based chili that you like. And then from there, you can go on to adapt. So after you've identified some things you already know how to make, you already know that your family likes and you're eating more of those, then you can start adapting some of the things that you typically eat. So replacing the meat with beans in a burrito, for example, or replacing the meat with tofu, for example. So just making little tweaks to some meals that you really love. And then lastly is to explore. So that's when you can start to, buy cookbooks and look for new recipes online and, browse the grocery store and find new ingredients to try. And I find that a lot of people like to start at the end. And they end up giving up because that explore step can feel overwhelming when you're new to it. So it's easier to start with the familiar, kind of build up your confidence, and then start to branch out from there.
I'm laughing inside because that's sort of a mistake that I made, Kayli, is that I have like a binder real thick. A ton of recipes is what I got initially. And then like I just couldn't move on any of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens when you talk about adapt is the way that I look at it is look at the foods that you already like and just make healthier versions. So my
Mm-hmm.
husband comes from a Pakistani family. I come from a Mexican family. And so that turned out to be what really worked for us. What foods do we like already? And because we were exploring early on with other things that we normally would never eat. Like I didn't grow up with shepherd's pie. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not, it wasn't traditional for me and I didn't like it. And so once we got that down and we found that we had a lot of things in common, like like the rice and beans in our backgrounds, but also the spices. So that really helped out. And now we're branching out to trying other things that, we didn't grow up with. And because we know more about spices now, the foods taste even more delicious. So I like that too. So basically adding rather than focusing on subtracting is
Mm-hmm.
what you're
Yeah.
saying. Okay.
Yeah,
And then
that's right.
what else can we do? I know one of them on your list is meal planning and batch cooking. And man, that's like strategy right there. Like,
Yeah, that can be a tough one. And I really like to kind of rebrand that as, time saving and kitchen shortcuts because that's really what it's about and what it provides for you. So, meal planning helps you prevent that, time when you're standing in front of the fridge at 6 o'clock on a weeknight, you're starving, your family's starving, and the drive-through is looking really good and really easy at that point. So if you have something planned and you have something prepped, then you're a lot more likely to follow through with that in those moments. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to plan out every single meal. And I tell people there is no right way to meal plan. I tell people to really customize it for their life and let it work for them. Don't make it a chore, let it work for you. So that's the point of it. So what nights do you know you're going to be really busy, that you need something really quick? Plan for those nights so that you have something there that you can whip up in less than 30 minutes. And then with the batch cooking, that's really about just taking some shortcuts. So using the Instant Pot or using a crock pot, making a big batch of grains like quinoa so that you can have that throughout the week. And that's really just to make your life easier, if you can, find those little shortcuts.
and it does get easier. Everyone is different and there is no right way. Some people like to prep all their meals on a Sunday and eat the same thing every day. I like to have a variety of that, a little bit different, but I don't really branch out that much. I know what my favorite foods are and I keep it simple. And you mentioned umami with mushrooms. And so you describe that. You also talk about browsing recipes and cookbooks. And that's at the point where we're ready to sort of branch out after we've already established sort of like a nice routine and improved our favorite meals. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And, kind of something that you alluded to with keeping it simple is, a really good strategy is to just find 3 to 5 staple meals that your family likes, that you like, that are easy for you to put together, and that you pretty much have the ingredients on hand for.
Mhm.
Um, at any given time so that you can lean on those because that's how most people eat anyway. Most people aren't eating a new recipe. At least I'm certainly not eating a new recipe every single night. So if you have those things that you just kind of know by heart, you can whip through the grocery store and grab what you need and, whip those things up. That really helps shift when you're transitioning.
Absolutely. This is great. And a couple of other things that can sometimes be challenging for people making the change. And that's, the family maybe not necessarily being on board and also just living life on a daily basis, dining out or traveling. Sometimes there can be some obstacles there as well. Do you have any tips for us on those?
Yeah. So, we all have our challenging situations or our trigger situations, whether that's, a family get together or traveling or, a happy hour after work, those sorts of things. So my recommendation is for people to identify those things ahead of time. So what situations are going to be challenging for you? What's going to make it difficult to kind of do your thing and stick to what you want to stick with, and make a plan in advance for those. So how will you handle those? How will you speak to the people that might, push back or question your choices? And just having that plan in place ahead of time can help people go into that situation with a lot more ease and, come out of it successful. So, traveling, for example, I love to stop at the grocery store as soon as I get to wherever I'm going, or if we're on the road, stop at the grocery store, because you can get a lot of fresh food and, pick up some staples. There's a lot of great things that, instant oatmeal and things that you can make in a hotel microwave. So there are definitely ways to do it.
I love that. Okay. And so as we're wrapping up, how can people connect with you and how can they learn more about Plant-Based Mavens?
Yeah, so they can go to plantbasedmavens.com and explore there. There's lots of recipes and articles, as I mentioned, and lots of free goodies as well. So I mentioned the low toxin living guide. There's also fertility and pregnancy checklists for plant-based women. There's a free mini course kind of for women who are just getting started, the 5 foundational foods that are all women should be eating. And, we mentioned the kind of non-diet and diet culture. And I'm certified in intuitive eating, which is an approach that really promotes that and helps women or people, anyone, learn how to incorporate external information. So whether that's nutrition recommendations or things that we see from the external world with our internal information. So what's best for us, what feels good in our body. So really that self-care approach that I mentioned. So I'll be launching a free mini course on that soon as well for people who want to learn more about that. And then Plant-Based Mavens on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you so much for all this information. I know that the women that are listening will find a lot of value in answering some of those questions, some of the concerns that people have, but also the tips that you've given us on how to transition to make it easier for us and for our families. And then finally, we are all going to be excited about Plant-Based Mavens to be part of that community where we can share information and feel safe and feel like someone is listening to our concerns. So thank you, Kayli, for everything that you're doing and for being on the show today.
Oh, right back at you, Maya. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast with your host, Maya Acosta. If you've enjoyed this podcast, do us a favor and share with one friend who can benefit from this episode. Feel free to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us to spread our message. You can also head on over to podinbox.com/HLS to leave me a voicemail. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you for listening.